PrimeKey Tech Days 2020. Welcome and great to have you here, everybody. My name is Clemens Wanko. I'm from TüV TRUST IT. We are an EU-wide operating accredited conformity assessment body, and I'm glad to have with me Kalev Pihl. He's CEO SKID Solutions from Tallinn in Estonia. Hi, Kalev.
Hello, Clemens, and hello, listeners and watchers.
One of the most advanced processes for user onboarding we have today is the biometric AI-based process for the Smart ID solution of SK. And that's what we like to talk to you about today. Kalev, let's have a look at Smart ID. What is it about with regards to onboarding? What does that mean for you?
So yes, Smart ID is now a couple of years old electronic identity solution, good for high-level identification in Estonia and also good for qualified electronic signatures based on the eIDAS. And therefore, like, we are heavily dependent on the eIDAS requirements for the onboarding as well. Out of those 3 million roughly customers today, we have over 1 million, roughly 1.5 million onboardings per year. And especially in Latvia and Lithuania, and less so in Estonia, we have the onboardings or had the onboardings last year in the offices of our registration authorities. And this kind of electronic onboarding that we had so far was SIM or SIM card-based mobile ID or the ID cards in different countries. So we did use the Article 24 in different ways, especially the Article 24 and 1.c about the qualified signatures given with the certificate that was issued against the face-to-face meeting. And the idea we had was to maybe jump to the Article 24 and 1D and then maybe to change that process.
Yeah, that was my question. Why then leaving the established grounds for the face-to-face onboarding?
Yeah, so not to only mention this, which is quite obvious that the area offices have their cost burden that they have to carry on. I brought out maybe some things that we consider. So first of all, the availability. We talk about the area offices. The availability in time is very, very different. The office is still closed for the night, and people do this kind of non-working things normally outside of the working hours. Right. Having an electronic identity is not always the work for people. So the next thing that we thought about, Kalev, was this kind of a scalability of how can we add additional users. What is the next step for the ease of onboarding? Do we add another array and maybe in the places where we don't have an array today, or can we somehow make it more scalable? And clearly this electronic onboarding would be more scalable in space as well. And then we have to think about the time it takes also for the area offices to learn how to issue stuff. Although we tend to have this presumption that people recognize people very well based on pictures in passports or ID cards. Not true, of course, especially if the photo is like 5 years old and the person has intentionally wanted to change its image, which many people do want to do. So it's a learning curve. And we also need to do quite a bit of integration to integrate the new array. And then we look at the customer journey. Do we see customers willing to travel all the time to the offices? Not anymore, especially not today, of course, with this current COVID situation. But it was clearly before any COVID happened. And then, of course, if you travel to this area office and it turns out that for some reason you forgot to take whatever it was needed to actually onboard yourself, when and how can you retry? At home, that normally means that you go to the cupboard, you take out whatever was needed, and you present that. in the office of FRA, that means that you have to travel again. So, and not at all kind of irrelevant is this thing that I personally do believe that human errors are really more probable to happen than the errors in algorithms, and that's also the quality issue for us. Clearly, it was one of the biggest things there.
Okay, yeah, I think we see the overall advantages of the new approach, but what were the specific points when you considered when you designed the new biometric onboarding process?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there, for us, we try to see like what are the cornerstones of this office or whatever other onboarding mechanism. Unfortunately, it isn't standardized, so we cannot talk about like there is everybody knows what it is. Actually, nobody knows what it is. It is assumed by so many different institutions. So here we went and tried to map the different meaningful things. And first thing that we tried to do is, first of all, we say that we are not the experts. Like probably somebody in the world has figured it out better than we will ever do. And that's the quick way of getting things going. So let's try to find who is doing that in the best possible manner in the world. And we went and did quite a long RFI-RFC process. And then we found somebody to manage the NFC-based document verification. And we definitely didn't want to go to any of this kind of flashing the document in a video and then making a face that we can understand from the video, the security features of a document, which even after half an hour of inspection of some of the documents, the forensics doesn't treat as fakes, although they are. So we know that the fake document is an issue. And we went to the straight to the NFC-based verification. We were very sure that this is the way to do it. One thing, it gives you enormously better understanding of the document itself, that it is real. And then it also gives you much better quality picture for the next step, which was then the facial recognition. So the facial recognition was also the biometric that we wanted to use. It's clear that we don't want to go into enhance access to the documents where the fingerprints are, and not to do any kind of fingerprint biometry there. So we wanted to have facial recognition. We wanted to understand who does that the best, and we wanted to have it server side. So we were very sure that we don't want app to do that. We don't want a device to give out the score for the facial recognition. We wanted that raw image to go somewhere on a server side, and somebody tells on the server side, which hopefully changing algorithms from day to day, that okay, that's the best we can do about that face. We believe that this is the person or this isn't the person. And the last thing, of course, the liveness detection. And something that is the fourth thing here that we tried but failed. We wanted also to give out the responsibility for making sure that the person understands what they do. That we couldn't do. That still remained with us, and we had a separate process for that. So to verify after all of those things, where we know that the document is there, the person is there, still remains the question, do they understand what happens? So, so that was something that we couldn't outsource. And of course, the hardest thing, I guess, is that really we have, based on this scheme, different parties who need, after we have ourselves understood that it is okay, we have to convince, we have to convince the auditors, the certifiers, as a service is certified and audited. We also have to declare that to the supervisory body. So the eIDAS kind of gives you the weird statement that conformity assessment body will assess, and it has to be member state approved process. And I guess that this is where rather I think I would hand it over to you, where you as a TÜV Austria SER who had to kind of go through the assessment now with us. Like, how did you think about that? That like, what was so special for you here? I expect there is some things.
Yeah, thanks. That's a valid question. Actually, what was so special about? Well, first, we had to find our reference point. That's been done quite quickly. Together with you, we selected the Article 24(1)(d) of the eIDAS regulation, saying, yeah, what we need to see is for that new biometric-based process that it shows equivalent assurance to what we know before from the physical face-to-face process. That's been selected quite quick. The question was then, how do we do this? Looking at biometrics and AI solutions, you immediately see that these are new grounds. They had not been successfully assessed so far, at least not that we would know. There were no standards and no guidelines available, and not a normative base under eIDAS or ETSI to put an assessment on. On the other hand, we certainly knew that we needed to cover the algorithms and the biometrics, asking whether they are suitable, reliable. We knew that we needed to cover the partially cloud-based implementation and the integration in new existing processes at SKID Solutions for the Smart ID. And whenever you see there's a big problem, what's a good idea to do then is you split it into smaller parts. And that's what we did, and we were very happy to have the supervisory body with us as discussion and sparrings partner. Together with them and with you, we put the problem apart into small pieces to place the assessment on.
So I think that it's obvious that there is kind of no good ground to base that all on, and I think that for the overall understanding, it would be good if you kind of go on and a little bit explain what is the structure and how did you approach that?
Yeah, how did we structure the work? What we actually did was to split it into 3 fundamental sections. The first section was about the ident process itself, covering all the biometrics, the core section, if you like. Then the second was cross sections, so everything supporting the biometric algorithm working properly and securely over time. And third, the general management and operations. And having said that, you easily see that the 2 first were the most exciting ones because they were dealing with biometrics, the algorithm-based face matching, liveness detection, but also with the algorithm management. And all the 3 were required to show that they are appropriate and reliable and lead actually at the end to an equivalent situation as we know it from the face-to-face process. Crucial turned out to be the process and algorithm management. And we quickly learned that the process required a permanent review of the global attack scenery. That was very important because of the fast development of the attacks you see against ident processes. So it was not sufficient to look at the biometrics and the algorithms only, but also to keep the quality level upright over time and to focus and look at the management behind these processes, ensuring that.
Mm-hmm. And of course, as you said, you did look through the kind of algorithms and the ways how the world is changing, and I think that the interesting part is what was the tipping point? Like, how did you at the end come to the conclusion that it was all fine, because you didn't have any kind of understandable reference point, but you somehow still issued us the report with a statement that, okay, we looked and that was fine.
Exactly. Yeah. That at the end, everything we did needed to be concentrated to this one crucial point: the yes or no go. But the clue actually was of the work we did. There was not that single point. There was not such thing. What we did rather was we designed and filled a rational comparing the identification elements we had in front of us with face-to-face and evaluating them. And it turned out that there was a large variety of points where biometrics needed to show it can properly compete with face-to-face. So suitability, reliability, quality. When we looked at the quality aspect, we dig down into things like false acceptance rate and false rejection rates, where the focus, of course, was on the secure side, so on the false acceptance rate, to keep that as low as possible, rather than having a low false rejection rate. That's something we allowed to set to medium. Yeah. Having all this in mind and putting this into the rational, we managed to look at its equivalence with regard to assurance to face-to-face. And what turned out to be very important as well was that the process needed to take into account specific biometric inherent problems. So where it's known from the structure and the algorithm implementation that there are weaknesses, then it, of course, was required to present measures, countermeasures dealing with these weaknesses. Mm-hmm. And last but not least, the final important point was the algorithm and process management over time. So that's valid for all security relevant processes actually, but it's far more valid for a process which is developed again further and further again. The algorithms don't sleep, so they are in constant development, and then we need to take extra care that the quality level is kept up right over time. So having looked at all these aspects in a rational, we came to a very interesting overall conclusion. We did not expect it to be so significant, because what happened was that we found a really big distance between what the biometric process provides with regard to face-to-face. Pretty solid, and the distance was on the better part for the biometric process. So we actually gained better results, improved security and reliability in the process. But having said that, again, always and constantly algorithm and process management was necessary in order to keep that upright over time. So at the end, I can say we reached a great result. We were able to not only convince ourselves or the auditors, but also to convince the supervisory body. That led to the positive conformity assessment report. And I can only say congratulations to the process, goal achieved and mission completed.
Yeah, Thank you.
No.
I think that it was one of the hardest audits that we have ever gone through, and one of the longest one that supervisory body has gone through. So.
Yeah, it was tough but successful, and we're quite proud having seen that and done that. So thanks everybody. In case of any questions, please be so kind and drop a note. So we shall be happy to answer later on. Thanks.
Thank you.
What a great presentation. Thank you. We will see if we have Kalev and Clemens online. Hello, greetings from Stockholm. How are you?
Well, thanks very much.
Thank you, guys. Great presentations. We already have some questions here in the chat. Thomas, would you take us?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first question is, do you reach 100% match with face recognition and liveness processing? I guess you never reach 100%, but do you have some approximations?
Would you want? Or shall I? Well, no, certainly not. 100% is an illusion, and that wouldn't be secure in any way. So, of course, there is a gap. There are figures around, and I don't want to say, but what we experienced in the audit was that there is a rather significant distance between face-to-face and what the face-to-face process is rated today, and what we calculated for the biometric process. So they are 3% better in the biometrics, provided, as we said, that over time the quality is managed and is constantly checked against upcoming attacks, and that's kept covered.
Thanks. Next question is, I'll bake two questions together here related to privacy. How did you implement the GDPR requirements, and how privacy requirements are addressed in such a solution?
I will take maybe that, and of course there we have to follow GDPR in that context, and also the eIDAS in the other context. So we have to still maintain the evidence for the onboarding, so everything related to that still is kept. But at the same time, then the biometric data and the delicate data that is connected to the automated decision making is basically only available for the time being of making the decision, and only the raw data that was used is actually stored for the future. And for that, I think went through quite a thorough discussion with our partners and then also auditors, how to set it up so that it kind of feels okay and is okay at the end. But it basically is a challenge with the current legal environment to optimize the stored data so that it actually doesn't include this delicate data about the automated decision making.
Okay, thanks. So there's plenty of questions. Some will have to be saved for later. But there's time for one more. In the context of eIDAS assessment for cloud operations, as you mentioned here, does this include CA aspects surrounding in the cloud, or is it just RA parts?
In this context, only the partners who are currently on this RA part are running the cloud services. None of the actual CA service runs on the cloud.
Yeah, that's clearly limited also for us, for the auditors, where we don't see the core, at the time being, we don't see core elements of the CA that they could be audited when it comes to qualified service in a cloud environment. So all the surrounding aspects, we're quite confident But when it comes to keys generation, HSMs, all these stuff, that's quite a way to go until we are convinced that this can be successfully audited according to what we have as standards available at the moment for the eIDAS regulation and surroundings.
Great. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us, and thank you again for great presentation. We see here there is quite an activity in the chat. Also, whoever is asking question, both chat and maybe direct message to Kalev or Clemens, we will try to address all the questions. Thank you, everybody. So
thank you.
Thank you a lot.